Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kathy Anderson. I'm the Gifted Education Program Consultant here at the Kentucky Department of Education. Welcome, welcome. We're so glad to have you this afternoon. I'm going to briefly read our purpose, and then we'll get started. The purpose for the State Advisory Council for Gifted and Talented Education is created and attached to the Kentucky Department of Education. Council's purpose is to make recommendations regarding the provisions of services for gifted and talented students in Kentucky's education system. All right. So, Joe, I'll turn it over to you, I guess.
All right, I'll go over our meeting norms for us.
All right.
Just remember, members must keep their cameras on. Members must speak when called for roll call or input. The meeting is being streamed through the KDE Media portal and being recorded. Remember to stay focused on the topic agenda and for our sake of time. There is a raised hand and chat feature that can be used if you have questions. Remember, additional feedback is provided through our meeting exit slip. I will provide a link to at the end of the meeting and through email. Hannah England is actually supposed to be taking notes for us today, but I do not see Hannah. Is Hannah with us?
I don't see Hannah, but Hannah said she was going to take notes,
So we may have to have somebody help us assist with taking notes. If not, me and Kathy will have to take care of that. But we've been trying to shuffle that around. We'll actually be talking about officer duties today too. So if anybody is excited about taking notes, be thinking about that officer role. Travel vouchers for anybody. We shouldn't need any this time since we're all online. But if we do have on-site travel, it's always submitted electronically through email. So I think that there's Hannah. Hey, Hannah, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Can you hear me?
yes.
Are you able to take notes for us today? I know that was kind of last minute and we appreciate it.
Yes, as soon as I can get my computer working, my screen is frozen and it's been non-responsive. So I really do apologize for that. I'm so sorry. But yes, I can take notes as soon as I get that up and going.
Thank you so much. I know that Kathy and I were shuffling around trying to get that taken care of, and we really appreciate Hannah being willing to do that. So we understand. Yep.
Yep. Thanks so much, Hannah.
Thanks. And
oh, you're welcome. I just, like I said, I hope I can get everything. I cannot see anybody right now. It's showing that I'm still connecting.
Okay.
We can see you and hear you.
Okay.
So I'll turn it over to Dr. Roberts now to go over our roll call of members.
Okay. I hope all is well with each of you. Katie Booth.
Here.
Good. Shanitra Bradford. Lindsay Burton. Kimberly Code.
Kimberly said she might be here at 1:30, Dr. Roberts.
Brandy Corbin. Pauline Covington. Byron Darnell.
Present.
Mason Dyer.
Here.
Hannah England.
Here.
Kirk Haynes. Jessica Hastings. Philip Cash. Jean Lee.
Here.
I can see you. I knew you would say here. Tiffany Marshall. Brenda Martin. John Maxey.
Here.
Julia Roberts here. Kim Nettleton.
Here.
Jennifer Fraker.
Here.
And that concludes the roll call.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts. Unfortunately, we don't have a quorum today, so we won't be able to do any kind of voting as that comes up. So there may be a couple of items we might need to table today. But thanks again for all of you being here. I just want to take a moment and introduce Jennifer Fraker. Jennifer Fraker works at the Council for Post-Secondary Education, and she has been appointed and I hope glad to represent CPE on our council. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for being here today. Also, if you guys, just as a reminder, Byron, I always say your name wrong. Darnell is also an ex officio member, and he is representing ESPB. I said that right? Educational Standards Professionals. Yes. Okay.
Close. EPSB.
ESPB. Sorry, got the acronym turned around a little bit.
There are too many.
There are a lot of acronyms. That's true. That's very true. All right. So we sent you the minutes for you to look over. We don't have a quorum in order to approve those, but does anybody have any additions or corrections that they want to make at this time?
No.
All right. So we'll just move forward with that because we can't ask for a motion or anything like that since we don't have a. All right. So on to the gifted and talented update. And Joe is going to pop that up on the screen so that you can see it here. Can everybody see the gifted and talented update?
Yes.
Okay. So I would like to give an update of the work of the office as it regards the council's priorities and recommendations. So let me just go over those very quickly. So priority 1 has to do with equity and identification services. And it was recommended by the council that the Kentucky Department of Education, KDE, support districts in identification practices and services that are equitable for all students, including those who are twice exceptional, English learners, students associated with racial and ethnic groups, all socioeconomic students, and students with special considerations to remove barriers for equal opportunity and access. So as you can see, there is our priority and our recommendation. And priority 1 is all about equity. And I read the recommendation to you. And so I'm going to go priority number 2 and also the recommendation. So priority 2 has to do with clarity on accommodations for gifted and talented GT students for identification and testing. And it was recommended that the KDE communicate and provide guidance and resources to school districts and families that assessment accommodations must be provided to students who have an IEP or individual education program or 504 plan. Then the last priority, our third priority, is around social emotional supports for GT students. And it was recommended that KDE contact districts to highlight the importance of social emotional learning needs of our gifted and talented students and gather resources that various role groups such as school psychologists, counselors, teachers, and parents can use to address the needs of students. So I'm just going to pause here for a second. And are there any other recommendations that anyone would like to make to the Kentucky Department of Education at this time? Okay. If not, then we'll just move on then. And I'd like to talk about some work that's been aligned to the priorities and the recommendations over the past school year. So on this slide, you will see a list of activities and documents that correspond to the SACGTE priorities and recommendations. For priority and recommendation number 1 and 2, I have presented information and provided technical assistance on equity and accommodations through the presentation opportunities listed on this slide. At the CAGE, that's the Kentucky Association for Gifted Education, Gifted Education Update back at the very beginning of the school year in August, we looked at how to look at our data for equity purposes. This was covered, as well as the importance of providing student accommodations when assessing for the gifted and talented assessment for the program. Also, twice exceptional 2E information about myths, identification and services, which were provided at the Directors of Special Education Institute. and the Kentucky Council for Exceptional Children's Conference. Information was also shared with the DEIB, which stands for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging coordinators, about the process for identifying students for the gifted program. Presentation included information about the importance of districts having policies and procedures which include equitable practices for identifying students who are disadvantaged, underachieving, and students with disabilities. Information was shared regarding the importance of understanding special considerations and the Gifted and Talented Identification and Placement Committee. At the CAGE conference, I gave presentations on twice exceptional students and also special considerations. At the twice exceptional presentation, this included material on reasons why it may be difficult to identify students and best practices for assessing and providing services for twice exceptional students. The special considerations presentation included information on the gifted regulations and how they might be implemented. Presentation discussed the importance of the Gifted and Talented Selection Committee and their understanding that students with disabilities, disadvantaged, and underachieving students might have conditions that may be masking their gifted and talented abilities, making them seem ineligible for the gifted program. Also, the Gifted and Talented Coordinator Handbook covers many topics, including information on special considerations. The Gifted and Talented Data Standards are directions for entering gifted and talented student data in Infinite Campus. The standards give directions on how to enter students if they have been identified using special considerations and local norms. So I know that was a lot. Does anybody have any questions about that or concerns or just any comments they want to make about that work, those activities, those presentations as they align to priority 1 and priority 2?
So Kathy, may I ask a question? Has any of this been added to the website? Not necessarily what you did, but the priorities and what the recommendations of the advisory council are?
A good question, Dr. Roberts. It is not, the priorities and recommendations have not been added to the web page. However, we have a Gifted and Talented Coordinator One Stop, which is a SharePoint site, and all of these activities and documents have been posted to that site for gifted and talented coordinators.
Well, perhaps that's something we can talk about, because these recommendations need to be carried out by central office people as well as our gifted coordinators. Others need to know about them too. So we can talk about this in a bit.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and look at work aligned with priorities. This is about priority number 3, which is social emotional supports for gifted students. And so we have a social emotional guidance document. This gives information for parents and teachers about the needs of gifted and talented students. This is posted on the KDE Gifted and Talented Resources page. It's also on the Gifted and Talented Coordinator SharePoint site as well. There is material in this document about the myths and guidance about ways to assist students. And as I said, this document has also been shared through the weekly Office of Special Education and Early Learning news. You can use email. So I just want to pause one more time and see if there's any questions or any other recommendations that members would like to make at this time. Okay. All right. So we'll move on then to a discussion of implementing gifted and talented services. And Dr. Roberts is going to facilitate this discussion.
Hi, thank you so much. I think we need to acknowledge the fact that we have worked for 2 years on the 3 priorities that Kathy shared with us. And perhaps what we need to talk about now is how do we make those recommendations something that are broadly known across the educational circles and frankly by parents as well? What suggestions do you have for disseminating that information? Well, surely you have some. And Joe and Kathy, you can help me by recognizing people if you see a hand up.
Yeah, we do have a raised hand, and it is a phone number, 606 number, if you would like to speak.
All right, am I unmuted?
Hey, Brian, how are you doing?
Hi, how are y'all doing? I'm so sorry. I had a time trying to get on to the Microsoft Teams, so I just finally did the call in. So thank goodness for backup measures. Yes, I wanted to on. Oh, okay. I wanted to comment and ask, is there a way that we could get access to that website that you said was for the GTE coordinators, as the SACGTE? That would be awesome if we can, even if we can't, if there's a process for us to have something added to that, but if just to be able to see what's on there and raise questions or make connections would be awesome. And that might even be a good plus and a step toward your question on how we can get the word out more. Of course, using social media, I think if we could do that a bit more strategically and frequently, that would be good. I think if we could get some information actually on hard copy, because I think we're starting to rely too much on soft copy. So if we could maybe get like a brochure or something, if we have a budget to get something printed up that have our priorities on there and get that out to the schools so that they can, one, in a poster form so that they can post it at their schools, and then some actual little handouts that they could send to the parents or have available at their parent meetings, at their parent teacher meetings. I also think if maybe some of us could, go around to some of these, maybe the quarterly meetings or the regional meetings or something where we can actually pitch some of our ideas. I did try to attend some of my board meetings in the local area and tell them some of the things that we were doing, make sure they were aware of some of the opportunities that were coming up for gifted students and trainings for staff and so forth. And I think that was helpful because some things they said, oh, I didn't know. And so that made me feel good that at least we were making that extra effort to get that information out there and make sure it was be utilized. So that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Brent.
Thank you, Brent. Kathy, what's your response concerning any funding that could do printing?
Well, I believe that's something that we would have to think about and talk about and get back to you.
So I think the best place to start is through the electronic means. Through, our webpage. We do have a GT web page, and so we can post priority information and anything electronically, and then also through the GT coordinator one-stop site. And then Kathy and I can follow up with our folks to ask about any financial questions for cost of printing.
I know one of the priorities was concerned about accommodations for students when they are being assessed. And it would seem to me that that is often beyond the gifted coordinator, that could involve other people within the school. How do you get information out to them to make sure that that answer is clear?
Yeah, we have
Mr.
listservs.
Roberts, I was thinking the same thing. Sorry, Joe. I actually was I love the idea of that informational like brochure that could be electronic. But I think for sure it's got to get posted on the website front and center as a first step. And then Joe, I wonder, and Kathy, if this could go out in the commissioner's weekly newsletter to draw attention broadly to school administrators. But then I think the first step still is really important. It's got to be on the website, as you know, so that when administrators and other folks distribute this, they then have some place to go find the information.
You know, since you've left, the Office of Special Education and Early Learning has a quarterly newsletter as well as a news,
News you can use.
news you can use email. So that would be a good way to distribute that information because GT coordinators, all the GT coordinators, all the directors of special education, all of the ESS coordinators,
preschool coordinators.
and preschool coordinators have access to that newsletter. It goes out to them weekly. So I think that's a good place that information be posted as well.
In addition to the commissioner's message. That's a great idea. Thanks for that.
I think I agree wholeheartedly with everything that's been said. I think perhaps we should send Commissioner Glass an official letter or I don't know if an email or whatever with our recommendations so that it comes just from the council. And I don't know if that's something I should do or if that's something that's done in-house. But to make it so that, if we look at our charge, it is to the department. And so making it that we have kind of closed out on these 3 priorities, and these are our recommendations. So is that something I should do?
Yes,
I'm
I
glad
think
to.
seen that from other groups. And so if you can just put it in a letter format, include the priorities and then your signature to the commissioner, that's typically how that's handled.
I would do that. I'll put that close to the top of my priorities today.
Thanks, Dr. Roberts. Katie Booth?
Yeah, this is along those same lines. I was just wondering how someone goes around getting something featured in the Kentucky teacher newsletter that KDE sends out, because I feel like even all the way down to the classroom level, the more that your classroom teachers know that accommodations should be used and that special considerations can also be used by the gifted school committees, I think the better that will be. So getting all the way down to like those classroom level stakeholders might be easy through that Kentucky teacher newsletter.
Good idea. Yes, we make requests with our Office of Communications if we need any information added to Kentucky Teacher. So Kathy can add that to the list.
Yes, I will add that to the list.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. What other suggestions do you have? We've talked about this 2 years. We need to make sure it goes someplace and that it matters.
What do you mean?
What do I mean? That we submit it and get the word out as to as many role groups as need this information in order to make appropriate decisions.
Absolutely.
Other ideas?
Is there a big meeting that they have with some of like the youth leaders that are included? Is there something that they'll be having maybe within the first quarter of the school year, the next school year, where some of the leaders of the student body and parents, where you got a good cross section of stakeholders, something that's already in place where maybe we can get added to that agenda, and maybe have a presentation from our committee?
There
And we'll
is a
have our big poster
superintendent's
board by
meeting.
then. Go ahead.
There is a superintendent's meeting.
Okay, when is that? Okay. Yeah, because I think I've watched some of those. They are good. And they sometimes have guests.
Yeah. I don't know
Mhm.
when the next one is, but they're pretty regularly, aren't they, John?
It will be
Mhm.
May 22nd,
Oh, good. Yeah.
but I don't,
I know.
it also depends on, they're working on the agenda now. I know that much.
Oh, now might be a
It-
perfect time to. So I know Dr. Roberts would be a wonderful person. If you need anybody else, I'm willing to be a part of that. But I know you all already got a wonderful selection of people. But I'm willing. But yeah, now would be a good time. Who would be the person to call there? Would that be a Dr. Roberts thing or a Kathy thing or a Joe thing?
Well, Jim Flynn is the executive director of that organization.
Oh, well, we may be talking about two different things too. I'm thinking about the
Oh, okay.
superintendent webcasts.
Oh, the webcast.
Mhm.
Sorry about that. I
That,
have no information on that.
Yep. So usually every month there will be a superintendent webcast that is hosted primarily by the commissioner, but it is more of an information opportunity for superintendents.
So is there a way, Byron, to get this type of information shared with superintendents?
Yes. So everything runs through communications. Ms. Tabman, Const Tabman would be the contact to prepare any information that would need to go into the slides for part of the presentation.
Mm. Oh,
Thanks.
so that'd be good if we at least have that submitted for a slide. But again, if they could have a special guest from our committee who could present it, that'd be awesome too.
Kathy and I can help coordinate with our Office of Communications. But like what Byron was leading us to, you have to kind of get in front of that a little bit so you can get on the agenda and plenty of time to prepare because they pretty much prepare, a month in advance. So just let us know what topic you want and who you'd like to share with, and Kathy and I can help follow up.
Thank you.
So it might be too late to get on the May webcast, but maybe the June webcast. Yeah.
Well, certainly a request
Jean,
can
I
always
see
be
your
made.
hands up.
Jean Lee?
Yes, somebody may have already said this, but I know I subscribe to various listservs, and I get messages from a variety of different listservs for different groups, stakeholders within the education system. So, and that may go through communications as well. But if something could be put on all of those listservs, that might be another way that we could reach various, teachers, principals, superintendents, library media specialists, counselors, just a different groups of educators.
Another great idea.
Thank you.
Kim, go ahead, Kim.
Hi. Is there a like a listserv or a meeting where the College of Education deans all come together that we could share it there so that they have the information to share with both their graduate programs and their undergraduate?
There isn't a listserv. So the department also tries to be very selective about sending mass emails for a whole host of reasons. That's why the Commissioner's Weekly message goes out, and then the Kentucky Teacher, those two being the primary sources since they do go statewide. However, when we hold EPSB meetings, there is the SACGTE group, and that's the group of College of Teacher Preparation Programs. And so they have a meeting. They also meet the day of the EPSB meeting, and this whatever is prepared to send out, I would be happy to have that included in that meeting, because you're going to have representations from many of our institutions across the state.
Thank you.
It's always kind of interesting and almost horrifying to me, the number of people who don't even know gifted is a category of exceptional children in Kentucky. And so I think I would hate to have our 2 years of talking about these priorities without thinking about how do we make the biggest impact with getting information out. It is so needed.
Yes. Can I make another suggestion?
Of
I know this
course.
will be, okay, thank you. I agree with you, that will be tough. We do need to do all we can to help improve that. That'd be great. I'm thinking, and I'm not sure what the process, because I know it's probably up to each school, but it's got to be a way we can at least request that that the schools consider, you know how they have those, what do you call those big signs, those electronic signs that have the messages going across? Gosh, I can't think of the name of it.
Marquee.
But you, marquee, the electronic marquees that's out near their yards. I don't know, especially maybe in February, maybe we can have a better chance of getting on that, because I know they have their own announcements. They want to keep that current, but at least maybe that. So if we ask now, maybe they can make at least some time during the year to make time to have at least one message dealing with GTE, and maybe, a priority that they want to foster. We would have already have gotten them all the priorities, and they could pick the one that they want to share, at that time, or they could share all of them at different times, maybe once a month. So however they want to do it, but just to ask that they consider it, when it's good for them, if they want to include it in our Gifted Education Month in February. But that would be good to kind of help that to make it more local, and to put that right on top of the agenda where parents can see it as they go by, and maybe they can ask, their GTE coordinator if they have more questions, and that could be part of the message. Our state priorities is this, or just that one, and then say, please contact your GTE for more, something like that. How does that sound?
Thank you. Other ideas? Well, I'll follow up this meeting with Kathy and Joe to look at the suggestions that we've made and come up with a plan of action, because we've met numerous times for 2 years talking about these priorities, and I don't want it to slip by and not make as big a impact as it is possible for us to make. And if you think of other things after the meeting, please send them to Kathy or Joe or to me, because we don't want to lose any good ideas along the way. That's really what I wanted to talk with you about, is how do we take what we've done and not just drop it, but how do we make a difference in regard to that? So Kathy, is there anything else you thought would be in this discussion?
I thought we were going to also talk about implementing gifted and talented services.
Well, let's do that. One of the things that we have all certainly known follows identification of a gifted child in any of our 5 categories that are really more than 5 categories, is to provide services that match the area of identification. What do you see as barriers to that happening, and what suggestions do you have for overcoming barriers? Jean Lee?
Okay, I'm not sure this is the place for this conversation, but one of the, I'm in far southeastern Kentucky, in rural area, high poverty area, and there's limited resources and lots of barriers to providing services to our students. And so one of the things, and it's partly because of our location, our culture, but one of the things that we try to do with most of our gifted students in terms of service is enrichment. And lots of the enrichment opportunities, I have kids looking at me right now. One of the enrichment opportunities that we try to do is to take our kids to provide opportunities for our gifted students they wouldn't otherwise be exposed to, and that costs money. And so I don't know that we've ever talked about asking KDE to ask for review of our statute that governs our gifted program, because there are some really great things in our statute, but there are a few things in there that I believe cause equity issues in providing those services. And I'll give you an example. We took a group of our gifted science kids, our middle school gifted science kids, to an event in Hazard where they were looking at NASA activities, and that's not a far distance. Hazard, from Harlan to Hazard, is not a far distance, but we had to provide the meal for the kids because all of our students are entitled to free and reduced lunch, pay for the bus, just that, and pay for the registration for all of those students. Just that trip cost us over $1,000 because transportation is just outrageous. On the way home, because of where we live, we don't have access to 4-lane highways. There was a truck wreck coming home on top of the mountain, and our kids got stuck in that. They didn't have access around that. They had to wait for 2 hours. They finally got access on an alternative route. By the time they did that, it was supper time. They were hungry. And they contacted me and said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Feed them. I'm not going to let kids go hungry." And so we reimbursed that. But just that one small trip, was cost prohibitive. We took a high school group to a museum in Louisville, and that trip was over $3,000. And so when 75% of that money goes to pay in salary, it leaves very little for our people to participate in conferences, to provide those enrichment services for our kids. And I just, like I said, I don't know if this is the place to talk about that or not, but I think it's something that has not been talked about. And I think when we talk about equity, when it costs more for certain districts to provide services for children, that's an equity issue. And the place to address that would be through the statute. And I guess the first step of that would be to go to the Kentucky Board of Education to ask them, if there was a way to address it. And one other thing I'll say, just while I'm talking about services and identification, and it goes to barriers and access. In the leadership description for identification for psychosocial leadership, it requires that students demonstrate leadership abilities in 3 different categories. And in our community, they don't always have an access to all 3 of those categories. And so we've kind of tried to do a workaround on that, but it always makes me feel bad for kids when, we have a student that exhibits psychosocial leadership skills, and we follow scales, and we do checklists and teacher recommendations. But when they don't have an opportunity, if their community is so far back and they're the only home, and it takes 2 miles to get out of that home to a 2-lane road, their community is their family. And that's not that's not an official leadership position. So I think there's a few things in our statute that create equity issues, that I wish that we could have an entity review that statute for that sole purpose, through the lens of, is there anything in this statute that would create equity issues for students that might be potentially gifted? That's my sermonette.
Well, undoubtedly, you've raised important issues probably for many schools in your part of the country, the state, as well as in other parts. I'm sure that's right. And when we talk about services, we, at that same time, several years ago, stopped talking about the gifted program, knowing that a service needs to match the area of identification, and a program is probably not the right way to talk about it. Otherwise, a child that's advanced in math and getting advanced coursework in math, the parent might see if they're not in the gifted program, they're not getting their needs met. And frankly, it's the match between identification and the service that we ought to be focusing on. Yeah.
Yes. And when you're trying to match services for 5 different categories, and you already have certain barriers that prevent equity, then that's the issue.
It's a real big challenge. You're absolutely right about that. What else would people like to add when talking about services in Kentucky?
Before we get too far, can I get the name of a speaker a while ago, the young lady who just made the comment? I can't see who's talking.
That was Jean Lee.
Jean Lee. Okay, thank you. Jeff, I think we talked about this before, but I don't know if it's been done yet. What about getting a survey out so we can get a better feel from the perspective of parents, from the perspective of students, from the perspective of the professionals, the GTE professionals, as to the difficulties they're having in matching those services and getting what they need? Do we have some concrete evidence, input, stats that's updated?
Not that I know of. Well, perhaps a discussion of services with our group online is a little bit of a challenge because it's a pretty big topic, and there would be multiple smaller topics that could be developed with that. Suffice it to say that we're delighted that the funding for Gifted Ed increased to $10 million a year ago. But probably, unless the school leaders are using other resources, including people, to focus on providing those services, it's probably lacking much direction that is needed for children across the Commonwealth to thrive. Kathy, I think we're probably ready to move on to the next part of our agenda.
All right.
And
So,
that'll be Kim Nettleton providing a CAGE update for us. Kim, are you ready?
I am.
You're on, Kim.
So some of these were collected before the Boil Water Advisory Meeting canceled. So some of them are a little older. But the first, so I have several little things to share. And one is that there was a very successful CAGE conference in February. CAGE was not sure that people would be still coming out, and it was very successful. And there's going to be an online conference in September, and they are having a, day, June 14th will be a conference day for people. So in addition, CAGE is going to be reaching out to parents, and they're currently planning 2 summer sessions online for parents to try to get some feedback from them on what kinds of things they're interested in as far as services for their child. Another thing, CAGE members attended NAGC Leadership and Advocacy Conference way back in November, and they met with legislators on Capitol Hill and asked for support, and I'm assuming that's monetary support for gifted education. Let me see, what else do I have? Okay, CAGE is collaborating with KDE to get the auto-populated GSSP in the near future, and Dr. Glass has been tremendously helpful in this. From what I understand, they want Infinite Campus to that technology to do a better coordination for the gifted teachers and coordinators, and so they're working with KDE on that. And CAGE has also conducted a survey of gifted teacher coordinators to gather the exact number of gifted educators per district to compile a student and gifted teacher ratio. And they'll be using this as part of the data that they're trying to pull together to advocate for more funding. And they are hoping to start that late summer or early this year, because it needs to be advocated way before it's time for votes in the spring next year. I think that's about everything. Those are all the notes I have to share.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. So next on our agenda is the election of officers for the 2023-2024 school year. We need to have a quorum of 10 people for our bylaws statement. And I'm not sure, but I count 9, and I just want to make sure we don't have 10. And let me just make sure I have everybody here. So I've counted Katie Booth, Kimberly Code, Mason Dyer, Hannah England, Jean Lee, Bryn Martin, John Maxey, Julia Roberts, and Kim Nettleton. And when I count that, I get 9. Is there anybody else here that's a voting member that I did not call? Okay. Well, then we will need to table those elections in for our next meeting. Okay, so Joe, I guess if you would, Joe's going to bring up the PowerPoint again.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to.
Yes, go ahead,
Brandon,
Fran.
I just wanted to ask. I'm sorry. I just wanted to ask in terms of the quorum. I noticed we've been having a few of the same people missing. Do you happen to recall offhand what's the rule in terms of how many meetings you can miss? I know it was like so many consecutive. And does that mean we still need to include them in the quorum count, or?
I believe our bylaws cover anything about attendance, Fran.
And this is an area that Melody
Okay.
and I have been working on for our advisory groups. Since this group is governor appointed, we need to be sensitive to that the governor has appointed these members. And so we do try to follow up and coordinate with them as best as we can to ask if they're still interested in serving. And Melody coordinates with our legal services office to reach out to the governor's office to make sure we have those slots filled up as their terms expire. And so we will continue to work on that and coordinate with Kathy.
This is actually one of the first meetings we haven't had a quorum. And I think it's because there are several, schools that have state testing, and we have members who are involved in state testing right now. And so this is like I said before, I think this is the first time we haven't had a quorum, and I think it's maybe due to that. So, but thanks for asking about that, Brandon. Joe, thank you for that follow-up.
Yeah, in terms, typically they expired in June 30th. So Melody and I have been reviewing advisory group membership, and we have been working with legal services here to look at that, and we'll continue to do that. And because we do know we have some members whose terms expire, and the rule is to serve 2 consecutive terms. And so we're looking at that, and we will follow up with Kathy. Keep in mind, the next meeting is not scheduled until September 20th. So there is a substantial amount of time until we get to the fall. So we'll need to make sure we address the term membership.
Right. So if you would, Joe,
Go to
since we're
the
talking
presentation.
about the future meetings, if you would bring those up so that we can look at those. And that you could go ahead and be putting those on your schedule for next year, or bringing up any questions that you have about the dates. So these are the proposed dates. And as of now, these are all open here at the state boardroom. The boardroom is open for these. Right, and so the first one is Wednesday, September the 20th. That one would be in person. Then the next one would be Wednesday, November the 15th. That one would be virtual. And then the next one proposed is Wednesday, January the 31st, which is 2024. And that one would be in person. And then Wednesday, April the 17th, 2024, that one would be in person. So how do those dates look on your calendars? Do you have any questions about that, concerns?
Are we looking at keeping this time slot 1 to 4?
I think it depends on what the agenda is, Bren. You know,
Okay.
usually our meetings go from 9 to 12, but when we had to reschedule today's meeting from back April the 13th, the boardroom was not open in the morning, so we had to schedule it for an afternoon. But we do have another conference room. It's not the boardroom that holds about 40 plus people. So if we needed to, we could meet in another room other than the state boardroom.
So I assume you would start with the 9 a.m. time on each of these, unless there's a location conflict, and then we would try to look for the afternoon.
Yes, yes. Right now, we've got it scheduled or held all day. So it just depends on the number of items and that type of thing.
Go ahead, Hannah. Did you have a question or a comment, Hannah? Saw hand raised.
Yeah. Anna, if you're talking, we can't hear you. If you want, you can put it in the chat if you're having issues with your.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Thank you. No, I have a quick question. I know that maybe a month or so ago, I had received an email. I know my term is expiring this summer, but an email was like, if you're interested in wanting to serve again or to continue, just to let you all know. So I don't know if does that work as a possibility if like no one else wants it, or if it's like, oh, well, if you would like to serve again, we can put you back on there, or how does that work?
Yes, if your term is expiring in June, then Melody and we typically send an email asking if you would like to be reappointed. If you would like to seek reappointment, you just let us know. And then Melody will turn in a spreadsheet of members who want to seek reappointment, or if they do not want to seek, then we will request, a new member be in that spot. So you just have to let us know.
So Hannah has let us know. We've reached out to several people. Joe, he's let us know they want to be reappointed. And Melody is well aware of that. She's our liaison to the governor's office, or to the person here at KDE who's the liaison to the governor's office. So she's got all of your information. And so now it's just an opportunity to wait and until we find out more. Generally, it seems like from my years here at the department, those announcements are usually made around June or July.
Okay.
So, but I don't know.
That sounds good. I didn't know if we would be in contact, whether we yes or no. So I was going to write those notes down tentatively, or the dates. Just go ahead and I guess prepare just in case. So, okay. Thank you.
Members need to serve until there's been an appointment. And so please, if you would, continue to serve until the governor's office or, Joe or I reach out to you if you would. So yes, please put those down in your calendar if you would, and then we'll be reaching out to you in the future about, more information about those dates and meeting times.
Kathy, one thing I thought of is I know the GT proclamation usually occurs right around February the 1st, right?
Right.
And so that January meeting will coincide close.
That was what I was thinking. Is the proclamation February the 1st?
No, it is not. I'm going to step away a moment to look at my calendar.
Right.
So I didn't know, I know typically you like to address that to where the meeting is close to where people can also attend the proclamation.
So Dr. Roberts is going to check on that dates. We might change that date. And
well, the truth of the matter, I don't see that I've written it down, but it is not the 1st. I know that. It's whatever, well, it's probably whatever that Wednesday is.
And so you're not voting on these dates yet. So Kathy can just make sure if, to put a note by that to consider coinciding that January meeting, maybe with the proclamation when we find out when it is in February.
Kathy, I'll follow up with you on that.
Okay, that sounds good. On that one there. All right, well, we have come to closing remarks, Dr. Roberts.
Well, my remarks would be, I so appreciate each of you being here and adding your thoughts to our discussion today. There is no doubt that advocating for gifted children must be done on the local level, the state level, as well as the national level. And right now, there are 2 pieces to advocate for on the national level. One of those is the JAVITS funding. The JAVITS is part of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. The funding for it has been about $17 million. The ask this year is $53 million, which is $3 for every gifted child in the country. We'll see. The other legislation that dropped just this week is the Booker bill on equity in advanced what is it? Equity it's looking at books as the opportunity to help kids engage in advanced coursework. And that's something that is a national problem. It's also a problem in Kentucky right now. So at the national level, there is the opportunity to speak out on behalf of gifted children. And I think you all know that the only federal legislation that mentions gifted specifically is the Jacob Javits Gifted and Talented Student Education Act. The only. Isn't that crazy? So advocating, of course, on the state level, I hope each of you is talking with legislators about the importance of raising the funding for gifted ed. I think as Jean Lee mentioned barriers, many of those relate to the fact that funding of $10 million for the state's gifted education services sounds like a lot, and it would be in my pocket. But when you spread it for all the school districts, it is a help. Absolutely. We certainly don't want to lose it, but it doesn't begin to muster the power and the services that additional funding would ask. And the summer's a great time to talk with legislators when they're home. It's really easy to have a cup of coffee with someone and talk about how important it is that we make sure that our students with gifts and talents have opportunities that remove the learning ceiling for them. So thanks for being here today. I'll follow up with Kathy and Joe about things we said we need to do. And then we may be tapping you on the shoulder to make sure that it all gets done. Have a wonderful summer with lots of learning and lots of fun.